you're starting something new, it is completely normal and natural to alternate between, oh yeah, I've got this, I'm smart, I have skills, I can do this, and I have no clue what I'm doing. There is it's just to kind of expect that and to be willing to listen to other people who have gone there before and to surround yourself with other similarly minded people, ideally people who are maybe just a little further along the journey than you. When
Mm.
I was just publishing my first book, I knew a lot more than the very, very beginning authors, but I hadn't been doing it for so long that I'm like, yeah, whatever. I knew what they were going through because I'd just been through it. And if you can connect with other entrepreneurs who have just been through the stage you're trying to do, that can be a gold mine.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as the founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. You ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast, Julia Goldstein. And Julie started out her journey in college doing a physics major, but ended up switching over to engineering. Got excited about the material sciences, and so graduated and started working in the semiconductor industry. Did a few different jobs and consulting gigs, and then moved over to the writing side more for journals. And then also along the way got into doing some music teaching. Then around 2011, founded a business doing content writing for journals and blogs and others. Also wrote a book along the way, and then realized that she loved teaching, and that led her to where she's at today. So with that much as an introduction, welcome on the podcast, Julia.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here.
Excited to have you on. So I just took a much longer journey and condensed it in the 30-second version of it. So why don't we rewind and unpack a bit and tell us a little bit about how your journey got started going into college, thinking you're going to be a physics major.
Sure, that was interesting. And you mentioned the music because, yeah, if people look at my LinkedIn profile to show the whole continuous journey, there's that bit where I was a music teacher. But I've been a musician since I was 7 years old. And as a kid, I was good at math and science. And so it just seemed, well, of course, physics, I could do acoustics, right? That's like science and music together. So that's what I should do. Well, just because maybe it sounds like that on paper doesn't mean it's really the best fit in reality. And yeah, I started college as a physics major. And then I realized in my sophomore year that I really wanted to do something more applied. Theoretical physics is important in the world, but it wasn't really right for me. And fortunately, Harvey Med College had a general engineering major, which I think more schools should have, because then young students don't need to decide exactly what kind of engineering they want to do when they enter college or when they have to declare their major. That way I was able to just kind of go into it open-minded and try out different things. And when I took the Intro to Material Science course and learned about the idea that engineers could tailor materials to have specific properties just by adding a little of this or that, or changing a heat treatment, that you can break things apart and look at the fracture surface under a microscope and figure out what happened. I just found that all super fascinating. I found it so fascinating that I decided to go to grad school in material science.
So now you decide, okay, this is a good path and avenue, and found it interesting. And so you switch gears a bit from physics and, music, although you would or circle back to that as you got farther into your career. But you get into going to grad school, and then as you're going through that, then where did you coming out of grad school, where did the journey take you, or where did you start your career from there?
Well, it was interesting. I started grad school at Stanford. They had a master's program there with a whole series of courses that covered really all aspects of material science. So it seemed like a really good fit because I didn't have an undergrad degree in material science. I'd only taken 2 material science courses my whole undergrad. So I went to Stanford, did that. I was in the PhD program. In fact, I took my quals. Now that's another thing. That experience was what made me realize that I loved public speaking, because these are oral exams on a topic. In order to officially be part of the PhD program, we had to pass these exams. And I was actually having fun taking them. And I thought, okay, either something is deeply wrong with me, or I just love getting up in front of people and explaining stuff. And it's maybe unusual, but it's something that maybe I can lean into at some point. Well, the professor I wanted to work with at Stanford, he didn't get a grant he was applying for, and so he couldn't take on any new students. And then I thought, well, what am I going to do? And I thought, well, I can leave school with a master's, which is something I thought about doing. And then I thought, no, I do want to get a PhD. And I went back over to Berkeley, where I had applied as an undergrad, and it was less than 2 years. So my application was still all there on file. The professor I'd kind of talked with there a little bit was happy to have me join his research group. So took my master's from Stanford and off I went to Berkeley. And I was doing research on solder alloys. Right, lead tin solder had been used in electronics for a long time. And I started hearing rumors about wanting to use lead-free solders. I thought, okay, I want to do some research and see what those look like. And that research just naturally, when I graduated, led to working in the electronics industry.
It's nice, and that makes sense. So it sounds like you found, hey, this is something that I'd like to dive into, an area that I think would be interesting and would enjoy. So you go into that. And how long were you in the industry, or how long did you work on those type of projects?
It's interesting because in some ways I'm still kind of in that industry, in that I work with companies in the industry because of my long-standing experience. I worked as an engineer for really just a few years in process development. This was in semiconductor packaging, which means you take a semiconductor chip, right? Those chips that power all our phones and computers and cars and everything. Well, they have to be connected to a circuit board, protected from the environment, and electrically connected to everything they need to function. And that's called packaging. And I was working in that area. I ended up doing some contract work there. And then, as I think you mentioned briefly, eventually switched over to the writing side because I was always the engineer who would write. And I've learned that that is somewhat of an unusual combination because a lot of engineers and scientists hate having to write papers.
So now, so you get into that and you say, okay, so was it sounds like putting words in your mouth, but definitely feel free to correct him if I'm wrong. It's kind of just a bit of a natural progression. In other words, hey, I found that I like writing, I can do it well. It's a bit of a niche or something that most people don't. And so I can, was it just kind of a natural progression that you just incrementally moved your career in that direction? Or was it more of, hey, I love doing this, nobody else does, and I'm going to switch gears and go in that direction? Kind of walk us through that.
I have told this story before, so I can tell it now because I didn't used to. It used to be the standard. I was the engineer who could write. That's what I ended up doing. Behind the scenes, so at this point, this was in around 2000, I was doing some content work, some contract engineering work for a company that was developing some pretty cool technology. Of course, in that I did write a paper for publication in a trade magazine, but I was also stepping into more of a project management kind of role. I liked that. The problem was my 2-year-old who wouldn't nap at preschool. He would walk around and talk to himself and play with his toys and disrupt all the other children at nap time. The preschool talked to me and they said, this won't work. You have to pick him up at noon. Well, that really wasn't very compatible with a project engineering kind of role. Again, this was back before video conferencing. This company was actually working on some of the technology that was eventually going to become some of that, with the idea that you didn't have to use overhead projectors anymore. Anyway,
So,
doing that kind of work remotely in 2000 was just not a reasonable thing. And that's when I said, I've always liked writing. That is really will allow me flexibility. I can do it whatever time of day or night works with my schedule. If I have to pick up the kids from preschool at noon, I can do that. And I can write when it works for me. So that's honestly the whole picture of how that came about. So it was a mixture of the situation and my skills and interests and abilities.
no, makes perfect sense. So now you say, okay, it matches up, or matches the interest, matches the lifestyle you're wanting, and kind of gives you that bandwidth and that availability to do what you want to do, and still incorporate the technical background and understanding and writing and all of those things. And so now, if I remember right, when we talked a little bit before, you kind of shifted into doing more on the consulting or independent contractor gig, or kind of going in your own direction and kind of starting that up, and at the same time doing music teaching. Is that about right?
Yes, to some degree. So most of the time in this writing, I was the technical editor of a trade journal called Advanced Packaging Magazine that was based on the East Coast, and nobody knew that the Silicon Valley office was in my dining room, but they didn't need to know. Anyway, the magazine went defunct. If you and some of your listeners may be aware that the print magazine industry was just not nearly as bright and shiny in 2008, 2009 as it had been at the beginning of the 21st century. They had to rely on advertising, which was going down. Everything was, it wasn't a good place to be. The magazine shut down, and I said, what next? And it just so happened at that point, I had already been volunteering teaching music at my son's school, because their budget cuts. There really wasn't a music program. And I found out about this organization that taught people how to teach music, because I've been playing music since I was 7 years old, but I didn't know how to teach it. I took this community college course because, again, the writing work for the magazine was really very much part-time. So, but that time when I was doing some of that and taking the college course, that was a lot, but I did it. And so then, because of my experience doing that, I got hired to teach music part-time at some different schools. And so it just all fell in when that writing gig fell apart, that I had the music teaching.
No, sounds like it was presented it as a good alternative and a good option, and so you got into the music teaching, and to build or give you the ability to pursue that passion. And then I think, if I remember right, along that journey around 2011 or so, you started your own business and kind of got into content writing. And so is that kind of just a natural extension of the technical writing you were doing, or is it more creative writing or incorporating what you're doing? Or kind of walk us through kind of how that journey progressed.
It was a little bit different. Interestingly enough, one of my contacts, and this is a parent at my kid's school, and so you never know, contacts, because people have business and work lives outside of being a parent. And he and I had volunteered on a school project together, but he was a project manager. And anyway, he had a connection with somebody who had been doing content writing for companies for decades. And I thought, well, that, like, sort of like technical marketing. I thought, well, that sounds really interesting. I didn't do that right away, but that had kind of planted the seed. And actually, the other piece, in 2010, I went back to school. I went to my local community college and earned a certificate in business leadership, because I recognized that teaching music, I had fun singing and dancing with the 7-year-olds. Second grade was my favorite, and the kids were really cute, and I had fun with it. I also realized that was really not the right long-term career path for me. And the going back to school and I'd never really taken business classes before. So I think it was very useful. And there's one that was called Human Relations in Business. that was probably my favorite class that I took. So I was just exploring and trying to figure out. And then I thought back to my friend's contact who I'd spoken with, who did the marketing content writing. And I thought, well, that sounds like a good way to go.
So now you decide, go take some classes, figure out what you want to do. That's a good way to go. So now how did you form or start a business around that?
Well, it's interesting. I had been self-employed for a long time. I was on contract with that magazine on 1099. I wasn't officially an employee. So I was kind of used to that being a self-employed thing. So I would say that I kind of started my business gradually from that viewpoint and found individual projects. I think the first one, I think it was something somebody posted on Indeed, and they were looking, this was a company that made sensors, right? That's similar to the kind of industries I'd worked for before, so I could speak their language. And they were looking for somebody on contract to do some writing for them. And I remember talking with the engineers there, and they said, wait a minute, you can interview us and then you can just go write an article? I said, yeah, I can do that. They were just amazed. Anyway, yeah, so that was that. I got another connection through LinkedIn. Somebody was posting that they were looking for somebody to write some particular reports and such. I remember talking with them. I'd also done a gig doing a column for another trade magazine. And that was again with one of my contacts who'd worked for the magazine where I'd been before. And so this new thing, they were listing the topics they wanted to write about. And I said, oh, I've covered all of these in this column I just wrote for the last year. So it was just kind of individual projects at a time, one at a time that came. It wasn't one day I never had a business and then all of a sudden I'm a business owner. It didn't feel black and white to me. I didn't think of myself as an entrepreneur. I was self-employed. And sometimes companies paid me money to do stuff. But that was about as far as I thought about it.
No, it sounds like it was a fun way to get into it, and it worked out well, and led to a great path to where you're at today. So catch us up a little bit. Where are you at today? I mean, or what are you continuing to do? Are you continuing to teach music, technical writing? Went off in the sunset and retired? Went back to corporate world, or kind of where are things at today, and how are things going?
No, oh, that's funny with the corporate world idea. There's this one client I've been working with them. It's a boutique PR agency that I've been working with since 2016. Again, that was my main contact there, was somebody I'd worked with at the magazine. So, I mean, the story is just keep up with people because you never know where these connections might lead, years later. And I remember this was 2019. Yes, because it was one of the last in-person conferences before everything shut down. Fall 2019, having lunch with them at a trade show. And they said, oh, do you want to come write for us full time? I'm like, no, I don't. I don't think I could go back to full-time corporate. I haven't been at full-time corporate since the 90s. And I just never saw myself going back. I said, I'm going to continue. I like working with you. I'm happy to continue to do that. Just, I want the freedom to do the different things that I want to do. And one of those things has been writing books. I think it was in 2017 when I said, wait a minute, I've been calling myself a writer for almost 20 years now, and I haven't written a book. How is that? I need to have written a book. I need to write a book. Well, I did. So now I'm working on my fourth book. I get addicted to writing and publishing books, I guess. And then, continuing the work, doing content writing for clients. But as you were saying, the teaching, realizing that, no, I don't want to go back and teach music to children. But I've been just a natural teacher in many ways, from dating from, I mean, from way back, from a long, from a long time ago, from back when I was 6 years old and taught my little sister to read because I thought that reading was so amazing and she shouldn't miss out. So I love giving workshops where I can not just present a bunch of information, I can build awareness and also inspire people to do something differently. And I like to do that with my books and in a more interactive setting, because books aren't really, they're kind of a one-way communication. Somebody buys the book, they read it. I may not ever meet them or interact with them. I mean, obviously there are many people who have bought my books who I've never met and probably never will. But sometimes somebody buys your book and they reach out. Like Paul, when he bought my first book, Material Value, in 2020, reached out. We had a Zoom call. We kept in touch over the years. He's now my co-author for our book that's coming out in 2024. Again, connections. You never know where things are going to lead. But with my business, I incorporated in 2022. I moved. I mean, not that many miles, but I moved, and so it seemed like a good time to switch over. I'd been a sole proprietor all these years, and to switch over and say I'm going to be an LLC. And so I've been a single member LLC since the beginning of 2022. And that was also around when I'd really been more consciously shifting toward the consulting type work where I'm helping with strategy, offering workshops, doing that kind of interactive teaching and inspiring the people at the companies to figure out new ways of doing things, where I'm not just going to write a thing for them. That might be part of the engagement, but also just to inspire them to do better. And really my passion around both materials and sustainability, which happens to be the title of the upcoming book, it just makes sense. It feels
No,
right.
that's awesome. No, it sounds like it's been a fun journey, and it sounds like I need to get into writing books so I can become addicted as much as you are. No, it sounds like a great path that you've taken. So, well, now as we've kind of reached the present day of your journey and even looking a bit into the future, great time to transition to the two questions I always ask or towards the end of each episode. So we'll jump to those now. So the first
Okay.
question I always ask is, along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made, and what'd you learn from it?
I would say, and no, I mean no ill will to the person I hired. But I'd gone to a writers conference when I was getting close to publishing Material Value, the first book. And I hired a publicist because like, oh, because I don't know anything about making a sell sheet and doing this and that and the other. And she's going to help me do this. I had some great conversations with her. I liked talking with her. She came up with some ideas for the back cover of my book. In retrospect, she wasn't my target audience. So I don't think those were really the best ones. And I feel like that was not a good investment of my money. I
Mm,
feel to some degree like I threw it away. And I I guess it was too early. It's not that hiring a publicist is necessarily a wrong move, but it wasn't the right move for me at that time. And
no,
so with
makes
my
sense.
second book, I didn't hire a publicist. I
Mm,
also I spent so I self-published my first few books. The next one I've got a contract with a publisher, but that could be a whole long conversation in managing all those aspects of it. But basically, to make a professionally to self-publish a book that is indistinguishable from the professionally published ones, you need to hire people because nobody knows how to do all the stuff themselves. And you need to hire, especially designers, cover designers, interior designers, editors, even editors need editors, all that. And I hired those people for my subsequent books with a better grasp on what was appropriate to spend, not hiring the cheapest, but recognizing that there are some ways to hold the expenses back a bit and
mm.
still get an excellent product.
No, makes Makes sense. And, sometimes it's interesting, it's in the timing. And you think, you get into something, you're not as familiar, you take the steps that, hey, maybe down the road I'll need that, or maybe down the road that'd be helpful, but not at the stage that you're at. And so you try and jump ahead, or you go by what others tell you. And yet you find out that, for the phase of the journey you're in, it's not the right step, or it's a mistake to go down that path. So it sounds like a easy mistake to make, but a great one to learn from.
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be people who are saying, "Oh, I can help you with this. I can help you with that. It will cost X thousand dollars," and you need to kind of, instead of getting too excited about it, really give it some serious thought. And is it the right thing that's going to help you where your business is at this time?
Absolutely. Makes perfect sense. So, okay, now second question that I always ask is, now if you're talking to somebody that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give them?
When you're starting something new, it is completely normal and natural to alternate between, oh yeah, I've got this, I'm smart, I have skills, I can do this, and I have no clue what I'm doing. It's just to kind of expect that, and to be willing to listen to other people who have gone there before, and to surround yourself with other similarly minded people, ideally people who are maybe just a little further along the journey than you. When I was just publishing my first book, I knew a lot more than the very, very beginning authors, but I hadn't been doing it for so long that I'm like, yeah, whatever. I knew what they were going through because I'd just been through it. And if you can connect with other entrepreneurs who have just been through the stage you're trying to do, that can be a gold mine.
No, I think that's definitely a great piece of advice, and a great takeaway. So, well, now as we wrap up the episode, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
Yeah, jlfgoldstein.com is my website. You can also reach it at jlfgcommunications.com. Those go to the same place. And if you go to the contact page, there's a nifty contact form. I respond to those. Well, if there's some that look like spam, I don't. But if you're listening here and you have an actual question for me, I will absolutely respond to that. And that's also, you can find out about my books there. You can find out about all the different services that I offer. And I would love to talk. Just reach out.
Sounds great. Well, definitely a great invitation. Encourage people to reach out, support a great business. If nothing else, make a new best friend. So with that, thank you again, Julia, for coming on the podcast. It's been it's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you, the listeners that are out there, if you have your own journey to share and you'd like to be guests on the podcast, we'd love to have you. So just go to inventiveguest.com, apply to be on the show. Couple more things as listeners, make sure to click share, subscribe, and leave us a review. Helps us to reach even more startups and small businesses to help them along their journey to success. And on that note, if you ever need help along your journey with patents or trademarks, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat. We're always here to help. Well, thank you again, Julia, for coming on the podcast, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thanks, Devin.